Have you ever wondered how a single step off the familiar path could change the course of everything? Beneath the towering pines of Oregon, in the quiet town of Cedar Falls, a 10-year-old girl and her loyal German shepherd would stumble upon a secret that would not only awaken a town, but also test the courage hidden inside the smallest of hearts. What Ellie Carter chose to do next would shake the police, silence the skeptics, and remind the world that miracles don't always arrive in thunder. They sometimes walk quietly beside us, wrapped in innocence and guarded by fur and fangs. The town of Cedar Falls lay cradled under a copper-gold sky, where mist curled from the river like breath from an unseen giant. Visitors often saw only the postcard beauty clusters of wooden homes, a weathered main street, hills rising into endless green. But for Ellie Carter, with her long brown hair and eyes too old for her years, this place was both her sanctuary and her cage, filled with secrets only the forest seemed willing to keep. Every afternoon after school, Ellie vanished into those woods, sketchbook under one arm, boots crunching the amber leaves. At her side moved Valor, her German shepherd 6 years old, black and silver fur catching the light like polished steel. More than a pet, he was her sentinel. His ears twitched at whispers she couldn't hear, his chest rumbled when the unseen drew near. Together, girl and dog disappeared into a kingdom where trees guarded her secrets better than people ever had. In town, Ellie always felt the sting of eyes that lingered too long. She was the Carter girl, daughter of Ellie Carter, the widow who kept alive a fading craft shop that smelled of pine shavings and copper wire. Evelyn, 38, wore her strength like a threadbare coat, visible but fraying. Once she had been known for quilts stitched with stories, carvings that seemed to breathe, jewelry spun like sunlight caught in stone. But since her husband's death 3 years before, her shop had become less a dream and more a battle. Customers dwindled, debts swelled, and every night Evelyn's tired hands still worked long after her spirit begged for rest. She loved Ellie fiercely, but worry pressed down like Oregon's endless rain. Each morning she asked herself, how much longer can I keep our fragile world from breaking apart? That autumn afternoon, Ellie walked deeper into the woods than she ever had before. The air grew colder, heavy clouds pressing low, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Valor walked ahead, nose low, tail stiff. Ellie hugged her scarf to her chin and hummed softly, trying to pretend she wasn't nervous until Valor stopped. His whole body locked tight, his ears flattened. A low, dangerous growl rolled from his throat. Ellie froze. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Valor didn't answer with another growl. He lunged forward. Ellie stumbled after him, her heart pounding, leaves crackling beneath each hurried step. The trees seemed to thicken, shadows bending closer, as if the forest wanted to hide what came next. And just when she thought she'd lost him, Valor's bark shattered the silence, sharp, urgent, echoing through the mist. When Ellie pushed through the brambles, breath ragged, she didn't yet know that what Valor had found would unravel everything Cedar Falls thought it knew. She didn't know the police would soon doubt their own eyes, or that her mother's quiet world would be torn open. What she found there, in the shadows of the pines, was not just a secret. It was a choice that would change lives forever. Then she saw it. Beneath a mass of fur, sprawled at the roots like a discarded doll, lay a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, even in stillness, his uniform darkened by blood that seeped from his side. His badge caught a weak glimmer of light through the branches. Deputy Nathan Cole, 34 years old. His face, rugged but pale, was twisted in pain. His chest rose shallowly, a rasping breath that barely lifted his frame. One hand clutched the earth, the other pressed feebly against the wound. Ellie froze. She had never seen so much blood, never stood so close to the fragility of life. For a heartbeat, she wanted to turn and run back to Cedar Falls, to the warmth of her mother's shop, to anywhere but here. But Valor barked sharply, circling the man, his eyes darting to Ellie as though urging her to act. Ellie's small hands trembled as she dropped to her knees beside the deputy. "Mister, can you hear me?" she whispered. His eyes fluttered, a faint groan slipping from his lips, but no words followed. Ellie bit her lip, her breath clouding in the chill air, and reached out, her fingers brushing his sleeve. The blood was warm and sticky against her skin. Panic surged in her chest, but beneath it stirred something else. Determination. This man was alive, but slipping away, and she could not just walk away. She pressed her scarf tighter around her neck, then hesitated. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Never give up what little you have." The scarf was her favorite, knitted by Evelyn last winter when money was scarce, but love, abundant. Yet when Valor barked again, a sharp, demanding sound, Ellie tore the scarf from her neck. She didn't yet know how, but she felt certain it could save Tim. As she leaned closer, Nathan's eyes flickered open briefly. They were gray, blue, clouded with pain, but there was a flicker of recognition, or perhaps desperation in them. His lips parted, but only a faint hiss escaped. Ellie whispered, "Hold on, please. Just hold on." Valor circled once more, then lay down beside them, pressing against Nathan's boots as if planting himself between the wounded man and whatever unseen danger lurked in the forest. The German shepherd's steady growl hummed like a vow of protection. The forest, once Ellie's playground, now felt alive with menace. The shadows lengthened, and the wind hissed through branches like whispers of warning. Ellie's hands tightened around her scarf, pressing it against the wound as best she could, though she had no real knowledge of medicine. Still, she clung to the belief that doing something was better than doing nothing. Far away on Main Street, Evelyn was closing the shop early. Rain had begun to fall, fine needles tapping the windows. She rubbed her temples, counting the coins in the till, realizing they would barely cover groceries for the week. Her thoughts drifted to Ellie, her brave, strange, the girl who spent more time with that German shepherd in the woods than with other children. Evelyn had told her countless times to be careful, to stay close, but Ellie was her father's child, curious and untamed, drawn to hidden paths. Evelyn sighed and wrapped her shawl tighter, unaware that at that very moment her daughter's path had crossed a destiny far greater than either of them could imagine. Back beneath the fir tree, Ellie's breath came fast and shallow. She glanced at her battered phone, its cracked screen, its battery life perpetually unreliable. She wanted to call for help, but hesitated. What if she couldn't get a signal this deep in the woods? What if she froze and wasted time fumbling? Her stomach knotted, and for a moment the weight of responsibility felt unbearable. Then she looked at Valor. The German shepherd's gaze met hers, steady and fierce, as if lending her his courage. Ellie straightened her back. Tomorrow she would only be a child again. But today, in this hidden corner of the forest, she had to be more. She dialed 911. The line rang once, then connected, a dispatcher's voice filling the silence. Ellie's words tumbled out, uneven, but urgent. "Please, there's a man. He's hurt. He's bleeding. He's a police officer, I think. Please send help. We're in the forest near Cedar Falls. Please hurry." The dispatcher's calm instructions anchored her, though fear still gnawed at her chest. She pressed the scarf tighter, whispered a prayer she barely knew how to form, and glanced toward the darkened forest. Somewhere beyond, unseen eyes might have been watching, but for now, she was not alone. Valor stood guard. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath, and Ellie Carter, with nothing but courage and a tattered scarf, held on to the fragile thread of another person's life. The forest floor was wet with fallen leaves, their colors darkened by the first steady drops of rain. Each leaf clung to the earth like a memory pressed in a book, veins glistening red-brown beneath the dimming light. Ellie Carter knelt in the thick carpet of them, her scarf wrapped tightly against Deputy Nathan Cole's wound. The fabric was already dark, heavy with blood, but she pressed harder, her small hands trembling with effort and fear. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Help is coming. You just have to hold on." Nathan's eyes fluttered open for the briefest moment. His lips moved, forming something like words, but the forest swallowed them. A weak groan escaped, and then his chest fell again into shallow, ragged breaths. His skin was cold against her fingertips. Ellie's phone, old and battered, lay open beside her. She had managed to reach the 911 dispatcher, who spoke in a calm, steady rhythm that contrasted with the frantic pounding of Ellie's heart. "You're doing good, sweetheart," the woman on the line said. "Stay with him. Keep pressure on the wound. Help is on the way. Can you tell me your name?" Ellie bit her lip. She glanced at Valor, who paced in a protective circle around them, hackles raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked, and the German shepherd's deep growl rumbled through the damp air. My name is Ellie Carter," she whispered into the phone. "I'm 10. Please hurry. He's bleeding so much. You're very brave." "Ellie," the dispatcher replied. "An ambulance and officers are on the way. Can you describe where you are?" Ellie looked around, panic seizing her chest. The forest stretched in every direction, endless trunks and dripping branches. I don't know. Near the big fir tree by the creek, Valor found him. Please just find us. You're doing perfectly. Don't move. Keep him warm if you can. Keep talking to me." Her breath trembled. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself, but shifted so her body shielded Nathan's books. She remembered how her father used to say that sometimes warmth was more than heat. It was the comfort of knowing someone was there. So Ellie leaned closer, murmuring words she barely believed. "You're going to be okay. Just don't leave yet. I'm not letting you." Valor settled by Nathan's boots, his massive frame pressed against the man as though lending strength. Rain dripped from his black and silver fur, his eyes never straying far from the darkness between trees. Meanwhile, Evelyn Carter stood behind the counter of her craft shop when the phone rang. The sound startled her. Customers rarely called anymore. She wiped her hands on a worn cloth and answered, expecting perhaps an order for a quilt or a piece of jewelry. "Mrs. Carter," a voice asked, official and clipped. "Yes, this is she. This is Officer Ramirez with Cedar Falls Police. Your daughter Ellie is safe, but she's with one of our deputies who's been injured in the forest. She called 911. An ambulance is on the way." The world tilted beneath Evelyn. For a moment, she could only grip the counter, her knuckles white. "What do you mean safe? What happened to her? What's going on?" She found Deputy Nathan Cole badly wounded. "Your daughter acted quickly. She's keeping pressure on the wound. Until medics arrive. She may have saved his life." A sob rose in Evelyn's throat, a tangled knot of terror and pride. "She's just a child," she whispered. "She's only 10. She's a hero, ma'am. We'll update you as soon as possible. Please, wait at your home. Someone will bring her back when it's safe." When the call ended, Evelyn stood frozen in the dim light of her shop. The shelves of unfinished crafts, the fabric, and carved wood blurred before her eyes. Her daughter was out there in the rain, facing something no child should. Pride wared with dread inside her chest. Ellie had always been strong, always chasing hidden paths, but Evelyn had prayed those paths would never lead her into danger. She sank into the old chair behind the counter, her heart hammering. For the first time since her husband's death, Evelyn felt powerless in a way that crafting or working late hours couldn't fix. All she could do now was wait and trust that the courage she had tried to build in her daughter would be enough. Back in the woods, sirens began to echo faintly in the distance, muffled by the thick trees. Relief washed over Ellie, but she dared not loosen her hands. Nathan groaned again, his eyelids twitching as if fighting to stay tethered to life. "Don't quit now," she whispered fiercely. "You're not allowed to." The dispatcher's voice broke in again. "Ellie, they're close. You may see lights soon. Keep holding on." Through the rain and shifting mist, faint beams of flashlights pierced the trees. Valor barked sharply, ears forward. Moments later, voices rang out, urgent but controlled. "Over here, we've got them." Two paramedics rushed forward, followed by officers with weapons drawn. They knelt beside Nathan, their movements practiced and swift. One replaced Ellie's blood-soaked scarf with bandages. The other checked his pulse. "You did good, kid," one of the paramedics said, glancing at Ellie. "You kept him alive long enough for us to get here." Ellie's hands fell limply to her lap, stray with blood, her scarf ruined. She looked at Valor, who licked her cheek as if to steady her, and for the first time since finding Nathan, she allowed herself to cry. Not sobs, not wails, just quiet tears that ran down her cheeks and mixed with the cold rain. The officers lifted Nathan onto a stretcher, his face pale, but his pulse steady under their care. As they carried him toward the waiting ambulance, one of the officers crouched by Ellie. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Your mom, he will be told, well, take you home." But Ellie hardly heard him. She only stared after the stretcher, her hands still stained red, the weight of what she had done pressing into her small shoulders. Valor pressed against her side, his warmth grounding her, his steady breathing reminding her she wasn't alone. By nightfall, Cedar Falls buzzed with whispers. A deputy had been attacked in the woods. A little girl and her German shepherd had found him and saved his life. No one knew the details, but rumors spread quickly in small towns. In kitchens and shops, neighbors spoke of bravery, of miracles, of how a child had done what many adults might not have managed. Evelyn, waiting at home with her shawl wrapped tightly around her, answered the knock on her door with trembling hands. An officer stood there with Ellie beside him, Valor at her heels. The sight of her daughter, shivering, pale, eyes wide and haunted, undid Evelyn completely. She pulled Ellie into her arms, clutching her as though she might disappear if she let go. "Mom," Ellie whispered into her shoulder, her voice small. "I just didn't want him to die." Evelyn held her tighter, tears burning her eyes. "You did the right thing. You were braver than anyone could ask. I'm proud of you, so proud. But oh, Ellie," her voice broke. "You're still my little girl." Valor leaned against both of them, as though reminding them that courage had many forms, human, canine, and sometimes both together. That night, as Evelyn tucked Ellie into bed, she brushed the hair from her daughter's face and kissed her forehead. For a moment, the weight of bills and the failing shop, the loneliness of widowhood all faded. All that mattered was that her daughter had faced darkness and chosen to act, and that choice had saved a life. The hospital in Cedar Falls was small, a red brick building on the edge of town where pine trees seemed to lean toward its windows like watchful guardians. The halls smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, and the lights buzzed faintly overhead. It wasn't the sort of place where miracles were expected. But that night, the staff whispered the word more than once. Ellie Carter sat in the waiting room, her small boots swinging above the linoleum floor, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had scrubbed the blood from her fingers, but faint stains lingered at her nails, reminders of what she had touched and done. Valor lay sprawled at her feet, his head resting against her legs, his chest rising and falling in steady, grounding rhythm. Every so often, strangers would pause to glance at the fashion. German shepherd, eyes soft with respect. He had been allowed in the hospital on account of the extraordinary circumstances. A living witness as much a savior as the child he guarded. The player. Doors to the emergency ward opened, and a doctor stepped out. His coat was rumpled, his expression grave yet tinged with wonder. Deputy Nathan Cole is stable, he announced to the small crowd of officers and staff who had gathered. He lost a lot of blood, but he's alive because someone acted quickly. His gaze found Ellie, because a 10-year-old girl didn't turn away. The room filled with murmurs. Some people clapped softly. An officer muttered, "A real hero." Ellie flushed scarlet, her fingers curling tighter around Valor's fur. Hero, the word felt far too large for her small shoulders, heavy in a way she hadn't expected. She hadn't wanted to be seen. She had only wanted to stop a man from dying. Reporters arrived the next day, their vans and cameras spilling into the quiet town like an unexpected storm. Cedar Falls, usually content to stay, invisible on maps, suddenly became a headline. Local girl saves deputies. Life, one newspaper declared. Another called Ellie, the angel of the forest. News anchors wanted interviews. Photographers wanted pictures of her with Valor. And neighbors she barely knew knocked at the door with cookies and flowers. Evelyn Carter stood at the threshold of her home, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, fending off journalists with polite but firm words. She kept Ellie close, shielding her from the cameras whenever possible. Evelyn's heart swelled with pride, yes, but also with worry. Her daughter had acted with a courage beyond her years, but now strangers wanted to own that story, to turn it into spectacle. And Evelyn knew too well that attention from the world was not always kind. Inside, Ellie retreated to her room, where the curtains were drawn and the world could not see her. She sat at her desk, sketching Valor in her notebook, his ears prick-ricked, his eyes sharp, the protector he had always been. "They don't understand," she whispered to him. Valor thumped his tail gently, as though in agreement. At school, the children stared. Some whispered with awe, others with envy, and a few with cruel teasing, masked as jokes. "What's it like saving a cop, Carter?" One boy sneered, though. His eyes betrayed curiosity more than malice. Ellie shrugged, shrinking into her seat, her cheeks burning. She didn't know how to explain that it hadn't felt like bravery. It had felt like terror, like clutching a scarf against a bleeding wound and praying that the forest would not swallow them both. During recess, Ellie avoided questions by running to the far fence, Valor trotting loyally beside her. The German shepherd was permitted on school grounds for the week, the principal having agreed that he was more than a pet. He was part of the story, part of the reason Nathan Cole still lived. The other children crowded closer, reaching out to pet him, but Valor leaned only into Ellie, his body a shield between her and the world. Meanwhile, Evelyn sat at the counter of her shop where unfinished crafts piled high. Customers drifted in, curious to see the mother of the girl in the headlines. Some bought trinkets, others only wanted to gossip. Though the extra coins helped, Evelyn's chest tightened. This was not the way she wanted to survive. She feared that the sudden glare of attention would fade, leaving only debts and exhaustion behind. Still, when she glanced at the photo tacked on the wall, a younger Ellie smiling beside her late father, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Her daughter was alive. That was enough. Back at the hospital, Nathan Cole's recovery became another part of the story. Officers visited him daily, offering jokes and quiet words of encouragement. Yet, Nathan himself spoke most often of Ellie. "That kid saved me," he told Detective Marion Torres one afternoon. "I'd be in the ground if not for her." Marion, 41, sharp-eyed and calm, nodded. She showed courage when most adults would have frozen. "But don't forget, Nathan, you'll carry that with you now. It's not just her burden." Nathan swallowed hard. The memory of cold earth and a child's trembling hands, pressing against his wound, still haunted him. He had seen darkness in his career, but never had he been brought back from its edge by something so unlikely. "She shouldn't have had to do it," he murmured. "No," Marion agreed. "But sometimes life doesn't wait for who's old enough or strong enough. Sometimes it asks children to stand taller than they should. And when they do, the rest of us have to make sure it wasn't in vain." That evening, Evelyn and Ellie visited Nathan at the hospital. The deputy sat upright in his bed, his color returning, though the bandages at his side reminded everyone how close he had come to being lost. He smiled weakly when Ellie entered, Valor patting at her heels. "Hey kid," Nathan said, his voice rough. "I hear I owe you my life." Ellie looked down at her shoes, shuffling them against the tile. I didn't want you to die," she whispered. Nathan's eyes softened. "That's more than enough." He reached out, and Valor pressed his head into Nathan's hand, tail wagging gently. "Looks like we're both in debt to you, Valor," Nathan added, scratching behind the German shepherd's ears. Evelyn stood back, her heart torn between pride and fear. She saw how easily her daughter brushed against danger now, how the world might pull her into battles no child should fight. Yet, in Nathan's words, she also heard acknowledgement, an adult's recognition of the weight Ellie had carried. And perhaps she thought that weight had already begun shaping her daughter into something remarkable. When they returned home that night, Ellie sat at her desk again, notebook open. She wrote in uneven handwriting, "Sometimes being brave doesn't feel like bravery at all. Sometimes it feels like being so scared you can't breathe, but you keep going anyway because someone needs you." She closed the book and curled up beside Valor, who rested his head on her pillow, his eyes watching the window where the world pressed in with its flashing lights and questions. Outside, Cedar Falls whispered her name like a tale told by firelight. But inside, Ellie only wanted quiet. She had not asked to be a hero. She had only chosen not to walk away. Cedar Falls had grown, restless beneath the sudden attention. What was once a quiet mountain town now hummed with rumors, reporters, and questions that refused to die down. The pine trees surrounding the town stood as they always had, but even their shadows seemed to whisper of secrets too long buried. Ellie Carter sat on the porch steps of her mother's house, her knees pulled to her chest. Valor stretched across the wooden boards beside her. His black and silver fur caught the waning light, ears twitching at every sound on the street. Ellie stroked the edge of his ear absent-mindedly, her thoughts tangled with the voices of people who now called hero. She didn't feel like one. The world wanted her bravery, but no one asked about her fear. Only Valor knew the truth, that in the forest she had prayed with every heartbeat that help would come before Nathan's life slipped away. From inside the house came the smell of rosemary bread. Evelyn Carter had baked again, though flour dusted her hair, and her shoulders slumped with fatigue. The shop had been quiet that day. A few townsfolk had bought small trinkets, likely out of sympathy rather than need. Evelyn knew the pattern. Pity purchases did not last. Still, she baked, perhaps, because baking was cheaper than despair, and feeding her daughter was something she could control. A knock came at the door, just as Evelyn set the loaf to cool. She wiped her hands on her apron, expecting perhaps another neighbor, bearing flowers or questions. But when she opened the door, she found a woman in a navy blazer and dark slacks, her expression steady and serious. "Mrs. Carter?" the woman asked, her tone measured. "Yes, I'm Detective Marion Torres. May I come in?" The name carried weight. Marion Torres had been with the county sheriff's office for nearly 2 decades, known for her persistence, her sharp instincts, and the quiet empathy that softened her otherwise steely demeanor. She was in her early 42nd, with olive-toned skin, dark hair streaks that seemed to read more than people said aloud. Evelyn hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Of course, Marion entered, her gaze sweeping over the modest living room, the shelves lined with half-finished crafts, the photographs of Evelyn's late husband, the backpack tossed on the couch. Ellie and Valor appeared at the threshold, Ellie clutching her notebook, Valor leaning close as if to measure the stranger. Marion crouched slightly, softening her voice. "You must be Ellie, and this is Valor. I've heard quite a lot about both of you." Ellie shifted, uncomfortably, pressing her face partly against Valor's neck. "Are you here to interview me like the reporters?" "No," Marion said gently. "I'm here because what happened to Deputy Cole wasn't an accident. He wasn't just unlucky in those woods. He was attacked." Evelyn drew in a sharp breath. "Attacked by who?" "That's what we're trying to come and find out," Marion replied. Deputy Cole had been following a trail, an investigation into a smuggling operation, illegal logging, and weapons trafficking. He was close to finding something. Too close. The words hung, heavy in the air. Ellie's heart thudded, as if each beat pressed the memory deeper into her chest. Nathan lying in the leaves, his blood soaking into her scarf. She tightened her grip on her notebook, and something inside her, the same spark that had urged her not to turn away that day, flickered again. Valor growled softly, as if sensing Ellie's unease. Marion raised a hand in reassurance. "He saved your daughter. Once. He may need saving again if this smuggling ring is as dangerous as we suspect. That's why I wanted to speak." With you. Both of you. Evelyn's voice trembled. My daughter has already been through enough. She's a child. Marian's expression softened. I understand, and I don't want her in danger, but children see things adults miss. Sometimes they notice details that change everything. All I'm asking is if Ellie recalls anything unusual when she found Deputy Cole. Anything at all. Ellie swallowed. Hard. She opened her notebook and traced her pencil across the page. It was something she had started the day after. Nathan's rescue, writing down everything she could remember, small and large, as though cataloging a secret world. She called it her detective log, though she had told no one until now. There was a broken branch, Ellie murmured. Not like the wind did it, snapped, clean, and footprints. Big ones. I don't know whose, but Valor kept looking east like something was there. I wrote it down. She held up her notebook shilly. Marian's. Eyes sharpened with interest. She accepted the notebook, flipping through Ellie's neat but childish handwriting. This is good. Very good. You've got an investigator's instinct. Evelyn frowned, torn between pride and fear. She's 10 years old. She shouldn't have to. She already has, Marian said quietly. And it saved a man's life. Don't underestimate her courage. Still, we'll do everything we can to keep her safe. Evelyn pressed a hand to her lips, fighting back tears. The last thing she wanted was for her daughter to be dragged deeper into darkness. But the look in Ellie's eyes, a mixture of fear, curiosity, and determination, was unmistakable. Ellie had already begun down this hidden path, whether Evelyn liked it or not. Before Marian left, she handed Evelyn a card. If you receive anything unusual, letters, calls, even whispers, please contact me. These men don't like witnesses. They may try to silence anyone connected. Later that night, after Evelyn tucked Ellie into bed, she found an envelope slid under the shop's door. No name, no return address. Inside was a grocery store gift card and a note written in block. Letters for your courage, for your girl, keep strong. Evelyn held it with shaking hands. It was kindness, yes, but laced with unease. Who had sent it? A grateful neighbor, an anonymous benefactor, or someone who wanted her family indebted, easier to manipulate? She tucked it away in a drawer, torn between gratitude and suspicion. In her room, Ellie whispered to Valor as she scribbled again in her notebook. They think I can't help, but maybe I can. Maybe this is how Dad would have wanted me to be. Brave, not just scared. She drew a crude map of the forest, marking where she had found Nathan, where the broken branch had been. Valor nudged her arm with his nose, and she smiled faintly. Don't worry, I'll keep it secret. Just between us. But in the stillness of that night, with the gift card hidden in a drawer and a little girl scribbling clues in a notebook, Cedar Falls seemed less like a quiet town and more like a stage where old ghosts and new dangers were preparing to collide. The storm rolled in without warning, swallowing Cedar Falls in a curtain of rain and wind. The pine trees bent low, their needles thrashing like whips under the weight of the gale. The town huddled in darkness as power flickered and thunder cracked above the mountains like the earth itself splitting open. For Ellie Carter, storms usually meant curling beneath blankets with Valor by her side, while Evelyn read aloud by candlelight. But tonight was different. Tonight, the storm carried whispers. Ellie had been restless since Detective Torres's visit. She could not forget the sharp look in Marian's eyes, the way her words suggested danger hidden in the woods. Ellie's notebook had filled with sketches and scrolled clues. Broken branches, heavy footprints, the place where Nathan had fallen. She traced those pages now by the glow of her bedside lamp, her heart thudding as the wind rattled the windows. Valor lay at her feet, his body tense. Each boom of thunder made his ears flick, but his eyes remained fixed on Ellie, reading her intent. She whispered, "We have to go, boy. I need to see if the forest holds more answers. If Nathan was attacked, there must be signs." As if in agreement, Valor rose, tail stiff, nose already pointed toward the door. Ellie dressed quickly, pulling on her boots and her raincoat, the yellow fabric too, large but snug against her determination. She slipped her notebook into her pocket and eased the door open. Evelyn's voice floated faintly from the kitchen, humming as she kneaded dough, unaware that her daughter was slipping and out into the storm. The rain struck Ellie's cheeks like needles as she and Valor ran down the empty street toward the pines. The world outside town was alive with chaos, branches cracking, streams overflowing, the wind howling through the hills. But the forest had always been Ellie's second home, and tonight, despite its menace, she felt drawn into it as though by an invisible thread. They pushed through the undergrowth, Valor moving ahead, his fur soaked but his posture alert. Ellie's flashlight beam cut weakly through the sheets of rain. "We'll just look," she muttered, though her voice trembled. Just a little, then we'll go home." The deeper they went, the darker it became. The storm muffled the forest's usual sounds. No owls, no rustling of deer, only the relentless hammer of rain and the groan of trees bending under the wind. Then Valor froze. His muscles stiffened, his ears locked forward, and a growl rumbled from his chest. Ellie aimed her flashlight where he stared, and her breath caught. Two men stood beneath a cluster of pines, their figures half shrouded in rain and shadow. They spoke in low voices, though. The storm carried fragments of their words. Shipment delayed, logs won't cover. Weapons moved east. Ellie's heart stopped. Weapons. Torres's words came back to her in a rush. Illegal logging, trafficking. These were the men. She stepped back, her boot snapping a twig. The sound cracked through the storm like gunfire. Both men whipped around, one cursed. "Who's there?" Valor barked. Furiously, his growl deepening into thunder of its own. The men's flashlight swung wildly, beams slicing through. Rain. One caught Ellie's yellow raincoat. There, a kid. Panic surged through her veins. She bolted, Valor lunging beside her, barking and warning. The men shouted, crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. Branches clawed at Ellie's arms, mud sucked at her boots, and the storm roared like a beast around her. She ducked beneath a fallen tree, scrambling on her knees. Valor spun back, teeth bared, snarling at the figures gaining ground. "Grab her!" One man shouted. Valor lunged, colliding with the first figure. His jaws snapped, teeth flashing white in the storm's gloom. The man fell back with a cry, but the other pressed forward, his flashlight beam jerking wildly. Ellie dove behind a rotting log, curling into herself, whispering a prayer she barely remembered from church. "Please, God, please don't let them find me." Her small body shook as she pressed into the mud, rain soaking through her coat. She clutched her notebook against her chest as though it could shield her. Valor's barks and growls filled the air, followed by shouts and curses. Ellie buried her face against her knees, whispering again and again, "Please, please, please." Back in town, Ellie Carter discovered her daughter's empty room. The bed was cold, the window cracked open, rain spilling across the sill. Panic gripped her chest like a vice. She dropped the dough from her hands and ran through the house, calling Ellie's name, her voice breaking. When no answer came, she grabbed the phone with trembling fingers and dialed. Detective Torres answered on the second ring. Evelyn's words tumbled out. "She's gone. Ellie, she's not here. The storm. Valor's gone too. Please, Marion, I can't." "Stay calm," Marion interrupted, though her own tone carried urgency. "I'll be right there. We'll find her." Even as Marion grabbed her coat, another call came in. Nathan Cole, still weak from his injuries but restless in his hospital bed, had learned of the missing child. Against medical advice, he pulled on his clothes and demanded to join the search. "I won't let her face what I couldn't finish," he told the nurse who tried to stop him. The storm thickened as Marion and Nathan, accompanied by two officers, drove toward the forest's edge. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the drenched pines. Nathan's jaw clenched, pain evident in the tightness of his movements, but his eyes burned with determination. "She saved me," he muttered. "Now it's my turn." Meanwhile, Ellie pressed herself deeper into the hollow of the log, every muscle taut with fear. Valor still fought, his snarls cutting through the storm, his body holding the men at bay. But she could hear their anger rising. "Shoot the dog if you have to," one shouted, her breath caught in her throat. Valor, her guardian, her friend. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to scream, but no sound came. She clutched her knees tighter, her heart hammering, her whispered prayers lost in the roar of the storm. The forest had become a battlefield. Rain hammered the earth until mud sucked at every step. Thunder crashed overhead and lightning split the sky into white scars. Ellie Carter pressed herself into the hollow of a rotting log, her arms wrapped around her notebook, tears mixing with the downpour. Valor's growls reverberated through the storm like the low notes of a drum, each one a warning, a promise, and a defiance. The men moved closer, flashlights jerking through the rain, their boots sloshing in the muck. One shouted above the storm, "Forget the kid. Grab the dog first," another voice snarled back. "The girl's seen too much. We take them both." Valor stood his ground, his black and silver coat plastered to his body, ears pinned, teeth bared. His bark exploded into the night, sharp and furious. When one of the men lunged forward, Valor met him head-on, jaws snapping around the man's arm. A scream tore through the storm as the flashlight clattered to the mud. The second man swung a stick, striking Valor across the ribs. The German shepherd staggered, but he did not fall. He launched again, shielding Ellie from every angle, as though his body were built for this very moment. Ellie trembled in the darkness of the log. She whispered, her voice breaking, "Please, Valor, please don't get hurt." The man Valor had bitten staggered back, clutching his bleeding arm. The other cursed and reached for something at his belt. Before he could draw it, headlights slashed through the trees. Red and blue lights reflected against the rain. Sirens wailed. "Police! Drop it!" Detective Marion Torres's voice cut through the chaos, strong as steel. Nathan Cole stumbled from the shadows beside her, his hand pressed against his healing side, pain etched into every fiber line of his face. Yet his pistol was steady, his eyes locked on the men. 2 officers followed, their flashlights converging on the scene. The men hesitated, torn between flight and fight. One bolted into the underbrush, vanishing into the storm. The other, bleeding and desperate, turned his rage on Valor. "Stupid mud!" he shouted, raising the stick again. Valor leapt before the blow could fall, knocking the man backward into the mud. But as he landed, a sharp cry escaped him. Blood streaked his flank where the stick had struck too hard. "Valor!" Ellie screamed, scrambling out of the log. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck as though her small body could protect him. The German shepherd's chest heaved, his breath rough, but his eyes stayed fixed on the enemy as if ready to fight again, even wounded. Nathan pushed forward despite Marion's warning hand. "Stay back, you're not fully. I owe them this," Nathan gritted, his voice low. He stepped into the clearing, his badge glinting faintly in the rain. "You're under arrest. Drop it now." The man raised his hand slowly, rage simmering beneath his submission. Officers cuffed him, dragging him away through the mud. Marion's eyes swept the area, calculating, already preparing for the chase after the one who fled. But, for now, her attention dropped to Ellie. "Ellie." Evelyn's voice pierced the storm. She burst into the clearing, her hair plastered to her face, eyes wild with terror. She ran to her daughter, collapsing to her knees in the mud. She pulled Ellie into her arms, holding her so tightly that Ellie could barely breathe. Tears streamed down Evelyn's cheeks, mixing with the rain. "Don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever leave me like that." "I'm sorry, Mom," Ellie sobbed into her shoulder. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to help." Evelyn pressed her lips to Ellie's wet hair, her voice breaking. "You're my little girl, my brave, foolish little girl. I don't know how strong you are, stronger than me, but you scared me more than I've ever been in my life." Valor whimpered, collapsing to his side. His body trembled, blood seeping from his wound. Ellie pulled free of her mother's arms, falling beside him. "No, no, no. Please stay with me, boy, please." Nathan crouched beside them, grimacing at the pain in his own side. He placed a steady hand on Valor's shoulder, feeling the dog's labored breath. "He's tough, but he needs help fast. We'll get him to the vet." Officers radioed frantically as Marion barked orders. Within minutes, a vehicle pulled up, lights cutting through the storm. Valor was lifted carefully onto a stretcher, his body shivering, his fur matted with blood. Ellie never let go of his paw, her small hand gripping it as though her touch alone could tether him to life. Inside the vehicle, Evelyn held Ellie close, her arms wrapped around both child and dog. Nathan climbed in too, ignoring the medics, who urged him back to the hospital. "I'm not leaving them," he said simply. Marion climbed in last, her eyes scanning the stormy trees, knowing the fight was far from over. As the vehicle sped toward the veterinary clinic, silence fell inside, except for Valor's labored breathing and Ellie's whispered prayers. She pressed her forehead against his, tears streaking her cheeks. "You saved me. Now, please let us save you." The rain finally began to ease by the time they reached the clinic. The veterinarian rushed out, a candidate woman in her 52nd, with hands that moved swiftly and firmly. Valor was carried inside, Ellie trailing after until Evelyn gently held her back. Through the glass window, Ellie watched. As the vet and her assistants worked, shaving fur, cleaning wounds, stitching torn flesh, each whimper made Ellie flinch. Each pause made her hold her breath. Nathan leaned against the wall, pale but unyielding. His gaze was fixed on Ellie. On the way, she pressed her small hands together in prayer, lips moving silently. He recognized the weight in her, the same burden he carried, the burden of courage too heavy for someone so young. Hours later, the vet emerged, her gloves stained, but her smile gentle. "He's a fighter. He'll need rest and care, but he's going to make it." Ellie cried out in relief, rushing forward to hug Valor's neck as soon as she was allowed inside. The German shepherd's eyes fluttered open, tired but warm, his tail giving a weak thump against the table. Ellie kissed his forehead, whispering, "You're my hero." Evelyn stood behind her, tears in her eyes, her hand resting on Nathan's shoulder. She looked at her daughter, mudstray, exhausted but unbroken, and realized with a pang that Ellie had grown beyond the fragile little girl she'd tried to shield. She had stepped into a world of shadows and chosen to stand tall even when it terrified her. Evelyn pulled her closer, holding her against her side, whispering, "You're stronger than I ever knew." Outside, the storm broke apart, the first stars piercing the clouds. For the Carter family and for Valor, the night had been nearly stolen everything. Yet somehow, together they had endured. Morning and Cedar Falls broke gray and thin, the storm having passed but leaving the world washed raw. Branches littered the streets, puddles shone like shattered glass, and the air carried that heavy silence that follows chaos, as though even the birds had yet to find their courage again. At the veterinary clinic, Ellie Carter sat curled in a chair, beside Valor's kennel. The German shepherd lay on a padded blanket, his flanks stitched and wrapped in white gauze. His chest rose and fell slowly, each breath heavy but steady every time. Ellie blinked. She remembered the moment when she thought he would be lost, and each rise of his chest felt like another miracle granted. She reached her hand through the bars, brushing her fingers over the warmth of his paw. "You're still with me?" she whispered. Evelyn sat nearby, exhaustion shadowing her face. She had barely slept, her shawl draped around her shoulders, but her eyes softened as she watched Ellie. For so long, she had tried to protect her daughter from hardship, shielding her from the sharp edges of the world. Yet the past days had proved what she already feared, that Ellie's courage was both gift and burden, drawing her into battles Evelyn could not stop. Detective Marian Torres arrived mid-morning, her blazer still damp from the storm. She carried a folder under her arm, her expression taut but purposeful. Nathan Cole was with her, walking more steadily than anyone expected though. The lines of pain still etched his face. He had refused to remain in the hospital, insisting that healing meant more than mending flesh. "Ellie," Marian said softly, kneeling so her eyes met. "The girls. Valor's bravery saved you, but now we need your help again. Do you feel up to answering a few questions?" Ellie nodded, her notebook already in her lap. She had spent much of the night scribbling while Valor slept. Memories, details, fragments of overheard words. She opened it now, revealing pages filled with crooked maps and clumsy handwriting. They talked about logs, Ellie said quietly, and weapons. One of them said the shipment was moving east. She pointed to the crude drawing of trees and an arrow she had traced. "And here's where I saw the broken branch and the footprints. I think they were watching that path." Marian's eyes lit with recognition. She spread out a photograph from her folder, showing a trail camera image of rough men hauling timber in the forest. "This matches what our surveillance has hinted at," she murmured. "But it's more. They weren't just smuggling wood. They were using the logging trucks to hide weapons." Nathan leaned forward, his gaze fixed on another document. Marian slid across the table. It was an old case file, yellowed at the edges. The ink faded. At the top was a name that made Nathan's throat close. "Deputy Alan Cole." "My father," Nathan whispered. His fingers shook as he touched the page. "I was 10 when he disappeared. They told us he was ambushed, that it was unsolved. I never believed it." Marian's voice softened. "This operation has been running for decades. I found evidence linking your father's disappearance to the same smuggling network. He was closing in on them just like you, and they silenced him." The room fell heavy with silence. Rain pattered faintly against the clinic windows, and Ellie's small gasp broke the stillness. "They hurt your dad, too," she whispered. Nathan nodded, his jaw tightening. "Yes, and now they tried to do the same to me. But your courage kept me alive, Ellie. Maybe, that's what my father would have wanted, for the truth not to stay buried." Ellie's notebook slid across the table as she pushed it toward him. "Then let's write everything down so they can't hide it again." Nathan smiled faintly through the heaviness in his chest. "You'd make a fine detective one day." Later that day, the sheriff's office hummed with unusual activity. Marian and Nathan spread maps across the table, marking routes through the mountains where logging trucks passed. Ellie and Evelyn sat in a corner, Valor lying at their feet, too weak to move much, but still watchful. Evelyn could not help but notice how the officers treated her daughter with respect, even deference. It frightened her as much as it filled her with pride. She leaned closer to Marian during a pause. "You're pulling her into this. She's just a child." Marian's eyes softened. "She's already in it, Mrs. Carter. None of us chose it, but Ellie's courage is part of this story now. We'll protect her as best we can." At that moment, a deputy entered carrying a small evidence box recovered from the woods after the storm. Inside lay a battered police radio, the metal dented, but the engraved name still visible under grime. A Cole. Nathan's breath caught. He lifted it reverently, running his thumb across the letters. His father's radio, lost 20 years ago, now found in the mud, not far from where Nathan himself had nearly died. His throat tightened. "He was here," Nathan murmured. "All this time, his fight never ended, and now it's mine to finish." Ellie reached out, touching the radio gently. "Maybe it's a sign like he left it for you, so you'd know." Nathan blinked hard, fighting back the wave of emotion. Maybe he did. That evening, Evelyn returned to her shop. She expected emptiness, the same silence that had haunted her for months. Instead, she found bags of flour stacked by the door, jars of preserves left on the counter, and handwritten notes tucked beneath baskets. "For your bread, because it gives us comfort. For Ellie, the bravest among us. You are not alone." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. She had lived for so long under the weight of survival, of bills and dwindling sales, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be held by community. Now, in the wake of her daughter's courage, Cedar Falls had opened its heart. When she returned home, she found Ellie asleep beside Valor, the dog's head resting in her lap. Evelyn knelt beside them, brushing a strand of damp hair from Ellie's forehead. "You're changing this town, little one," she whispered, "and maybe you're changing me too." The dawn that broke over Cedar Falls felt different from those that had come before. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean, and sunlight spilled across the pines like gold poured from the heavens. Yet, beneath the beauty, the town buzzed, with a tension it had not known in years. Whispers of raids, of smuggling, of hidden crimes ran through the narrow streets like fire on dry grass. Cedar Falls, long content in its obscurity, was awakening. Inside the sheriff's office, maps and papers covered the long oak table. Detective Marian Torres stood at its head, her dark hair tied back, her gaze sharp as she outlined the plan. Nathan Cole, still pale but standing taller now, leaned against the table, his hand resting on the battered radio engraved with his father's name. It was more than evidence to him. It was a legacy and a promise. "We have their roots," Marian said, tapping a marked trail with her pen. "Thanks to Ellie's notes, we know where they plan to move the next shipment. Logging trucks will cover the weapons just as before. If we intercept them here," she jabbed the map near the old mill road. "We cut them off from their buyers, but we'll need precision. These men are armed and desperate." Officers around the table nodded, some with grim determination, others with unease. Small town deputies rarely faced organized crime. Yet, the weight of the last weeks, the near loss of Nathan, the courage of a child, the community's unrest, had lit a fire beneath them. Ellie sat quietly, in a corner, Valor resting his head on her lap. The German shepherd's stitches were still tender, but his eyes remained bright, following every movement in the room. Ellie stroked his fur, her notebook open beside her. She had drawn maps, arrows, and even written down fragments of the smugglers' conversations. To her, it felt like piecing together a puzzle. To the adults, it was vital intelligence. Nathan caught her gaze and offered a small smile. "Your notes gave us what we needed, Ellie. You and Valor helped make this possible." Ellie flushed, ducking her head. "I just wrote what I saw. That's what good detectives do," Marian said gently. They noticed what others overlook. The day stretched long as the officers prepared. By late afternoon, the convoy of patrol cars rolled toward the forest, their lights off, engines low. Marian rode in the lead car, Nathan beside her despite her protests that he should still be resting. "I can't stay behind," he told her firmly. "This is my father's fight as much as mine, and I won't let Ellie's courage go unanswered." Meanwhile, Ellie Carter stood outside her shop, now bustling for the first time in years. The townsfolk had come not just to buy, but to help. A retired carpenter offered to fix the shelves. A farmer delivered sacks of flour, and 2 teenagers painted a new sign above the door. In bold letters, it read, "Bravery and Bread." Beneath the name, Evelyn displayed Ellie's drawings and Valor's photo, turning the shop into both bakery and gallery, a living reminder of courage. For the first time since her husband's death, Evelyn felt something stir inside her chest. Hope. The town was no longer simply watching her struggle. It was standing with her. In the forest, the trap was set. Officers crouched behind fallen logs, weapons ready, radios crackling softly. The rumble of engines echoed through the trees, and soon the convoy of logging trucks appeared, headlights cutting through the dusk. Marian gave the signal. Now patrol cars surged forward, blocking the road. Shouts rang out as smugglers leapt from the trucks, weapons flashing in the fading light. Gunfire cracked through the air, sharp against the quiet of the pines. The deputies pressed forward, training and resolve, overcoming fear. Nathan moved with him, his hand steady on his weapon. Each step carried the weight of his father's memory. Amid the chaos, he spotted a man clutching an old revolver, his eyes wild, "Drop it!" Nathan shouted. When the man raised the weapon instead, Nathan fired. The gun clattered to the ground, and the smuggler fell to his knees, hands raised. Valor kept at a safe distance with Ellie, barked furiously as the fight raged. Ellie clutched his collar, whispering, "Stay, boy, please stay." Her heart hammered, but she knew this was beyond her hands now. The battle raged only minutes, but felt eternal. At last, the trucks were seized, weapons confiscated, and the remaining smugglers handcuffed. The air rang with the echoes of shouts, the crackle of radios, and the heavy breathing of officers who knew they had struck a decisive blow. Nathan stood over the crates inside the first truck. Rifles, pistols, and ammunition gleamed beneath the tarps. But at the very bottom lay something else, a small leather pouch weathered with age. Nathan picked it up, his fingers trembling as he unfastened the clasp. Inside was a folded piece of paper, stained and torn. It was a field note signed by Alan Cole. Nathan's breath caught. The words were faded but legible. "If you find this, know I tried. No, I gave everything to. Stop them. Do not let them win. AC." His knees weakened, but Marion's steady hand on his shoulder kept him upright. Tears blurred his vision. For 20 years, he had carried questions with no answers. And, now in the back of a smuggler's truck, his father's voice reached across time. News of the raid spread through Cedar Falls before the officers even returned. Word of mouth traveled faster than any radio. Neighbors emerged onto porches, shopkeepers lit lanterns, and whispers rose into cheers. For the first time in memory, the town felt united, not in gossip or pity, but in pride. At Bravery and Bread, Evelyn lit the new sign as people crowded in, buying loaves of fresh bread and admiring Ellie's drawings pinned to the walls. One woman raised a toast with a mug of cider. To Ellie and Valor, the reason Cedar Falls remembered its courage. The room erupted in applause. Evelyn stood behind the counter, tears brimming in her eyes, but her smile steady. She saw her daughter. In the crowd, Valor at her side, and Nathan standing quietly in the doorway, the leather pouch still in his hand. For once, the grief in his eyes was balanced by something new. "Peace," Ellie scribbled in her notebook at a corner table, her handwriting uneven but determined. "We're not just a town anymore. We're a family, and families don't let darkness win." The first snow of winter came quietly to Cedar Falls, soft flakes, drifting down like feathers shaken loose from the sky. They settled on rooftops, blanketed the pines, and softened the scars the storm had left behind. In the town square, strings of lanterns glowed against the dusk, and townsfolk gathered in the coats and scarves, their breath puffing in the cold air. For, and once, Cedar Falls was not whispering in fear. It was celebrating. A stage had been set at the edge of the square, decorated with pine boughs and garlands woven by the townspeople themselves. At its center stood a long table draped with the flag of Oregon, the county seal beside it. Nathan Cole walked up the steps slowly, his side still tender, but his posture proud. Detective Marion Torres stood with him, her gaze steady as always, though tonight even she allowed herself a smile. The sheriff addressed the crowd first, his voice carrying over the hush. "Tonight, we honor not only the success of our officers, but the bravery that reminded us what this town stands for. A child, and her dog showed us that courage doesn't wait for age, and loyalty knows no bounds." Applause rippled through the square. Ellie Carter, standing near the front, clutched Ellie's hand, her eyes shining with tears she did not bother to hide. Beside them, Valor sat tall, despite the bandages still visible beneath his winter coat. His ears perked as though he understood every word. Nathan stepped forward, holding the old police radio engraved with his father's name. His voice wavered but grew, stronger with each syllable. 20 years ago, my father gave his life, trying to stop the same darkness we have now. Defeated. I thought his sacrifice had been forgotten, but because of Ellie Carter and Valor, it wasn't. They carried forward what he began. And today, we don't just close a case, we carry a legacy. He turned toward Ellie, and we begin something new. Another wave of applause swelled, some cheering Ellie's name, others calling Valor the hero of Cedar Falls. Ellie flushed, crimson, clutching her scarf tighter, her free hand resting on Valor's back. She whispered to him, "They're really talking about you, you know." The sheriff lifted a small velvet box, in recognition of extraordinary bravery, loyalty, and service to this community. "We present this medal to Valor." The crowd erupted in cheers as Nathan knelt to fasten the medal onto the German shepherd's collar. Valor blinked up at Ellie with calm, steadfast eyes, then wagged his tail once, a dignified acceptance. Cameras flashed, children squealed with excitement, and a cheer rose that seemed to echo into the surrounding pines. Ellie hugged his neck, whispering, "You deserve it, boy," more than anyone. The ceremony continued, with Nathan announcing the launch of a new community program, training children in basic first aid and emergency response. "If a 10-year-old can save a life," he said, his voice steady, "then we owe it to her and to ourselves to give every child the tools to do the same." He paused, glancing at Ellie with pride. "She will be our example, a reminder that courage begins with small hands and big hearts." The idea lit a spark among the town's folk. Teachers and parents, and even shopkeepers volunteered to help. For the first time in years, Cedar Falls felt not like a forgotten place, but like a community ready to stand together. That evening, the Carter household glowed with warmth. Evelyn had invited Nathan and Marion to dinner, a gesture of gratitude, but also of something deeper. The little house was filled with the scent of rosemary bread, fresh from the oven, stew simmering on the stove, and pine logs crackling in the fireplace. Ellie set the table with mismatched plates, humming softly, her cheeks pink from excitement. Valor sprawled near the fire, the metal gleaming on his collar, his tail thumping whenever Ellie passed. When they finally sat down, the gathering that night felt less like neighbors around a table and more like a family stitched together by threads unseen. Nathan bowed his head before eating, his voice low as he whispered a prayer for his father, for Cedar Falls, and for the wounds this little town had somehow survived. Marion raised her glass, the firelight catching her smile. "To new beginnings, to Cedar Falls, and to the smallest heroes with the greatest courage." Ellie, barely able to sit still, lifted her glass of milk, eyes sparkling. "To Valor!" she shouted. The dog barked once, sharp and proud, as if to seal the toast. Laughter rolled around the room, warm as the fire crackling in the hearth. After dinner, while the grown-ups spoke of rebuilding the mill rising again, safe trails opening, children given new places to dream, Ellie curled into her chair with her notebook. Her handwriting was uneven, but her words flowed steady, almost urgent, as though she was capturing the heartbeat of the night before it slipped away. "Sometimes miracles don't come in thunder or lightning," she wrote, "but in a dog who refuses to let go, and a girl who chooses to stay when running feels easier." She paused, listening to Valor's steady breathing at the hearth, then added another line. "I think that's what Dad would have wanted, too." Across the table, Evelyn watched her daughter, and, for the first time in years, the stone of grief she carried began to crack. Love, fierce, ordinary, unrelenting, seeped through. But just as peace settled, the sound came sharp, sudden. Valor's ears shot up, his body stiffened. From the darkness beyond the window, a branch snapped, not the sound of wind, but of footsteps. The laughter faded, replaced by a hush so fragile it could break. Ellie's pencil froze. Nathan's hand lowered from his glass. Evelyn's chest tightened. Valor growled low, a warning that vibrated through the floorboards. In that moment, every heart in the room understood. The story wasn't finished. The forest still held its secrets. Danger might not be gone, only waiting. And yet, even as fear pressed close, Ellie looked at Valor, then back at her mother, and whispered the words that carried more weight than thunder. "We'll stand together, just like before." Because in Cedar Falls, miracles weren't just in what had been saved. They lived in the courage to face what might come next.